The Chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Bera.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. As with everyone on this committee and throughout the country, our thoughts and prayers go to the victims of these heinous attacks in Paris. But it is that reminder that we are in this long conflict and war against terror. And this is, make no underestimation, this is a long haul fighting against these terrorists who want to hurt us and want to kill us. My question is going to be directed to Mr. Bergen. This is much more than just a traditional ground war or ground operation. This is counterintelligence, counterterrorism. We can and have been successful killing ISIS fighters in Syria. I believe the number is we've killed over 10,000 fighters, but the problem is we're losing the recruitment war. We're losing the propaganda war. It is my belief, and I brought this up in committee previously, that they are using the tools of the Internet, social media, et cetera, to recruit foreigners to continue to replace these individuals. And if we don't win that battle on the front end, we can kill them in Syria, but if they can continue to replace these fighters, that is a bigger threat. Because once they're there, if they're U.S. citizens, if they're European citizens, it is a very time-consuming, difficult task to prevent them from coming back. Mr. Bergen, what would your recommendations be, your assessment on that propaganda war, on whether we are doing enough on the front end to prevent these recruits, and so we don't have to fight them on the back end?
I agree with that assessment, because if CENTCOM's figures are correct of 10,000 fighters being killed and the estimates of 1,000 foreign fighters coming in every month, I mean, it's sort of a stalemate in terms of recruitment. I think one thing that's useful is social pressure on social media companies. So every social media company, a lot of these are immature companies. They're recently formed. They tend to have, they don't want the government telling them what to do as kind of their ideological frame. And we've seen that Facebook was quite effective in enforcing its own terms of use. The terms of use of these companies are you can't put material on your site that solicits acts of violence. And so all they have to do is enforce their own terms of use. And we saw Twitter was initially reluctant and now is beginning to do that. And so, it's not just the government by fiat saying you've got to do that, it's also just sort of social pressure. And that will be pretty effective, because if the violent and jihadi content doesn't exist, then it's not going to incite people to be recruited. And so I think there's just something to be said for the hearings like this, just to make this kind of clear that this is something that these companies should be doing. And then, then it becomes a harder issue with this question. I mean, ISIS is telling people to use Tor, which is the dark net. It is instructing people to use Android phones, which are the most secure phones. It's instructing them to use Kik and WhatsApp and these other encrypted, anonymized applications. And how do you deal with that? I just don't know. I mean, it's just an observation that it's happening. Once we've identified the problem, then we can start having a conversation about what to do with it. But even if the United States government said all these companies should basically allow a back door, that doesn't. There's an application called Telegram, which is based in Germany. ISIS is using that very heavily. So even if we do say to all tech companies, you have to put a back door in, that doesn't prevent other companies around the world from just going ahead and doing their own thing.
Well, Mr. Bergen, you've identified some of the challenges that we have. So we know what we're facing. We know the challenges, and we know places where we are losing and they are winning this recruitment war. We have to double down, and there is an urgency of now, because we can fight them over there, and we should fight them over there and kill them over there and defeat them over there in Syria. But they are also using these tools of communication to recruit individuals who want to harm us right here. And if we are not using everything with our means to prevent that, we are going to be attacked. And that is a problem. And that is a concern I have with the administration, that we are not doing enough on that front. General Keane, you would agree with the assessment that this is a long-term engagement, this is a long-term battle against terror. That is not a traditional ground campaign, and anyone who thinks this is a traditional ground war where we're going to send 50,000 troops in is mistaken.
I agree with this. I mean, I think we're involved in a multi-generational struggle with radical Islam, and I think it dominates It'll dominate the first half of this century, much less communist ideology dominated the latter part of the 20th century. And you know, what's sad, in my judgment, is that, and frustrating, you know, we're 14 years from 9/11, and we've never had a comprehensive strategy to deal with the entire rubric of what radical Islam is. And it's far too long after 9/11 to still, through two presidents, a Republican and a Democratic one, that we've not formed the kind of political and military alliances that we did to deal with communist ideology. And we should have regional and global alliances to deal with this. In terms of the long-term nature of radical Islam, its ideology, et cetera, this is not something we can do from America. This is the people who are dealing with this directly have to be a part of all of that. ISIS, however, in what it represents in Syria and Iraq, that is a problem we can handle much more in the near term. There'll be another ISIS, to be sure, if we don't do the big issue.
Right.
But that is something that we can deal with and should deal with and move with a sense of urgency and a sense of resolve and commitment to do that. And don't get trapped into the fact that, and I believe this is an error the President has made, that, well, this is going to take multi-years to solve.
Right.
The fact of the matter, think of it this way. ISIS has, what differentiates ISIS from any other terrorist organization we've dealt with is that they own territory. Right. And from that territory, they're able to do all these other things that we're concerned about. But the fact that they own territory is also their greatest vulnerability.
Absolutely.
Owning territory for ISIS is no different than Germans owning territory, the Japanese, the Koreans. You can physically take it away from them.
Absolutely.
Thank you.